Are you making any money at wholesale? You might be surprised. Hi everybody, welcome to the DCSI Parts Guys. We're presented by Dealership CSI. We're powered by ESPM. Today we're going to talk about your wholesale business. Are you making money? Are you not making money? Do you even know what happens to the bottom line here? I'm Rick. Here's Jerry. Good morning, Jerry. How you doing?
Good morning, Rick. I'm doing pretty good. Looking forward to talking about some wholesale issues, and just want to make people aware that they need to look at things once in a while and check it out, see if you're making money.
Well, Jerry, we've got a lot of clients that are in the wholesale business. Out of all your clients, what do you think the percentage of stores you deal with do a fair amount to a high amount of wholesale?
Well, Rick, I think that's changed over the years, and it kind of depends upon the manufacturer line of the client in some cases too. So I would say a rough estimate, probably only about 25% of our clients are really what I would consider to be active in the wholesale market. It's gotten very competitive, and you really need to take a step back, take a look, and we're going to show you how to take that look to see if it's really worth your time and effort.
Well, and that's the problem. A lot of guys don't even know what to look at. We think that when we churn a lot of money through, we're getting this amount of gross profit. But the question is, what does it cost us to get that business and to get that gross profit? So to answer the question, we've developed what we call a wholesale department pro forma. And this pro forma is designed to take the scenario that you have carved out your wholesale department completely away from any other department. So even go so far as to think that, Jerry, you go out on your own, you open up your own wholesale business. We'll call it Jerry's Wholesale. Well, the question is, can I make any money doing that? So this pro forma that we're talking about takes into consideration a lot of different expenses that are attributed to your wholesale department, and at the end of the day, once we've paid all the bills, are we making any money? So the first thing we look at, Jer, is the decision whether we should talk about gross profit as a percentage of total gross, or should we talk about cost of sales as far as allocation of expenses. What do you think about that, Jer?
Well, Rick, I think you really have to look at it at cost of sales. We're comparing based upon our acquisition costs of the inventory and things like that. So cost of sales is really the only fair comparison to use when you're trying to do a proper analysis of this department. Like you said, the wholesale department, you got to look at it as almost a separate little business within a business. So let's see if that business is making any money for you, or if you're just spinning your wheels and going through a lot of effort not to generate any revenue.
So if we look at the spreadsheet on our first example here, we're looking at this particular dealership, wholesale part sales of $3.9 million, their cost of sale $2,998, and the wholesale gross of $903,000. So if we just looked at the contribution to gross profit from this wholesale operation, it's 29%. If we look at the contribution to cost of sale, it's 39%. And Jerry, like you said, I think the 39%, or the cost of sale, whatever it comes out to be, is the number to use, because it doesn't matter how much we're making on the part. We still have to handle the part. So we've got parts that we're ordering, we're checking in, we're sending out, and a lot of times there's not a lot of margin left. So the cost of sale really talks about the volume of parts that are going through this piece of our business, and how we can make that part of this calculation. So the other thing that we do now is we start going through the expenses right off the financial statement, and we've decided that 39.5 is our allocation for expenses. However, there's a couple of them that most dealerships don't take into consideration, and that is the cost of accounts receivable. So if you had your own business, Jerry, you'd have to go out and borrow money, and you'd have to pay interest on that money. So if we look at this typical situation here, this dealer typically carries about 100,000 in receivables on an ongoing basis, and if they had to pay interest on that for the year, that's about $6,000 at 6%. So we've got to take that into consideration, and that's 100% of that, because the only reason we're doing that is to support our wholesale business. And the inventory that we carry to support that business also has to be taken into consideration. So Jerry, if you were able to go out on your own and put together your own wholesale operation, you'd have to either have your own cash or borrow some cash to have inventory. Well, even if it's your own cash, there's a cost of having that money tied up in inventory. And there's a lot of stores out there that use up these dealership dollars for receivables and for inventory and really don't think a lot of it. Jared, do you have anybody out there that's using a little different approach to this money as far as interest goes?
Absolutely, Rick. I've got clients where the department is actually charged an interest charge on the inventory, and it's a fair assessment because, like you said, there's a cost of money. You've got all this money invested in the inventory, and if it wasn't invested in that inventory, it could be somewhere making money for you. So there's got to be a carrying expense on that inventory, and if we're carrying more inventory because we're active in the wholesale, obviously we need to attribute that cost to that inventory also and figure that into our expense.
So most dealers look at flooring for their cars. That's an interest expense. Why wouldn't we look at parts inventory the same way? So anyway, to move on with our assessment here, so we start plugging in the numbers, and now we can go through and take a look at, first of all, how much did we sell, how much profit did we make. There's also line 4 here, shows stock order allowance earned if you have some discounting or things like that, you know, wholesale discounts, truckload discounts for some manufacturers. That's where you'd put it there, so we can take into consideration all of the profit that has been generated by wholesale. So then we start going down the line and we look at the 39% number that we talked about. We've got to look at our people, we've got to look at all the different expenses that happen in the department, and when we get down to the bottom, we now see that this particular dealership had total expenses of $446,000 attributed to their wholesale business, and they had $903,000, if you remember, of gross profit. So the 446 out of the gross leaves 473, or 12% net. What do you think of that, Jared? Is that a pretty good business model?
Hey, at 12% net, Rick, I'm totally in favor of that, and that's a pretty good return on the investment that we're making here. And obviously at 12%, we're generating some revenue for the dealership, we're generating revenue for the wholesale department, and it's pretty justifiable at that kind of level.
I agree. I think that's a great job that they're doing, and it pays to be in that business. If we look at the bottom of the sheet, there's another calculation here, and it's the wholesale markup to break even. So in this particular dealership, I've got to sell at cost plus 15 to even break even. My gross profit margin comes out at 13% when I go cost plus 15. So if I were going to do some negotiation with a customer, this is where I would look to make sure that I'm not dipping below the magic line of break even. Of course, I'm not in business to break even. I want to make some money, but I have to know where that line is. So if you remember, Jared, back to our very first DCSI parts guys, we talked about markup and gross profit. And here's a good example of where this chart comes in handy. We just saw this example that says I need 15% over cost to get a 13% margin. If you go back to our sheet, you see a 15% markup gives you a 13% margin. So all of this stuff ties together, and it's important to know how this stuff plays with each other so we can look at the facts, we can do some calculations and figure out exactly where we need to be, because in a lot of ways we've been doing wholesale for many years. It's evolved, it's grown, it's just part of what we do. But there are some stores that should get out of the wholesale business or change their method of how they're charging, their profitability, their expenses, and other things to get this thing profitable. So if you look at our next example, Jer, we're going to look at a General Motors store, and a little different group of numbers here. We've got 1.2 on wholesale parts, cost of sales 1.7 or 1.07, and gross profit $189,000. Well, they also earned $38,000 in stock order allowance or wholesale comp, so that goes into consideration. But same kind of story here. Numbers are different, but the gross is coming up as 15% of the contribution, and the cost of sales is 38.5. So we're going with the 38.5 with our expenses, just like we did before. We start to put everything together, and we've got our 39% that we're tracking along the way. Come down to the bottom line, and this store isn't doing so well. Jer, what are you looking at here?
Well, Rick, when you are only operating with that kind of a gross profit margin and your expenses, the expenses don't change. It's 38% based upon the cost of sales. So you've really got to get down to the bottom line and figure out where you're at. And obviously, with that kind of a margin, the bottom line says I'm doing a lot of work for not much money.
Well, not much money. We're actually losing money on this deal. So let's take a look at the numbers here, and what does this store have to do to get profitable? Well, a little different story here. I need to go cost plus 23 to maintain an 18.8 margin, which is what I need to break even. And you can see here with the red ink all over the place, we're not breaking even. We're losing $12,000. We're losing $1,000 a month on this wholesale operation. And we're doing a pretty good business. We're doing over $1 million or over $100,000 a month in sales. So it's not like it's a minute part of our business. It's taken up a lot of time, a lot of energy, and unfortunately, we've got a whole bunch of pricing issues that are causing our problems. So our next session, Jarrett, that we're going to talk about is we're going to look at the margins on individual wholesale accounts and ask ourselves, what are we doing to help improve that margin? We'll talk about our special wholesale report that we're able to capture, and then what do we do with that information? So if you want to get a copy of our margin chart, email us at the DCSI Parts Guys at gmail.com. If you also want to do a pro forma on your own business, Jerry, what do we do?
Well, Rick, I think we can give them an example of this form to use, but it's going to take some calculations. It takes looking at your financial statement and putting the numbers to paper. Like you said, what we saw here, obviously there are two examples, a Mercedes store and a GM store. They're different markets. The GM store, obviously, you have a lot more competition in the marketplace, and that's really what puts some pressure on those gross profit margins. And when your gross profit margin gets to a certain point, you got to know where that point is, where you're not making any money anymore, and it's maybe not worth your efforts in that area. We're not saying wholesale is a bad thing. We're just saying that if you're going to be in the business, you want to make money doing it.
Well, and that's the whole deal with being in the parts department. Parts department's a good profit center. It doesn't make sense to dilute that profit with a losing wholesale business. some cases we can turn it around. We can get different margins. We can take some customers out of the mix that we're not making any money on, that may be causing some problems, and a rise in expense. There's a lot of expense to do this business, and all of our wholesale customers expect top-notch service. They expect immediate delivery. They expect us to have everything. And oh, by the way, can you carry the accounts receivable until I'm ready to pay you? So a lot of things go into this, and a lot of it is just stepping back, taking a look at it. And if you are one of our clients and you want to look at your wholesale business this way, get a hold of your dealership CSI consultant. Say, let's do a wholesale pro forma. If you're not one of our clients and you want to do this, drop us an email back at the DCSI Parts Guys at gmail.com, and we'll get a hold of you and see if we can help you out and take a look at some of this stuff. So Jared, thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Rick, it was my pleasure. And like I said, take a good look at this information and take a look at your own operation to see if it's worthwhile for you. And hopefully we'll see you all back here real soon on the DCSI Parts Guide channel, because we've got some more information coming up for you.
All right, thanks again, Jared. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you like us, subscribe to the channel, give us some likes on the YouTube thumbs up, and share this around. We've got a lot of clients that are using these videos as part of their department meetings, part of their manager meetings, because it gives a little insight into what goes on back in the parts department. It helps parts managers share this information with their staff. If I've got 4 or 5 people working for me in the parts department, I'm hoping everybody understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. And the more education that we can get out there, the better. And that's why we're doing these videos, and I hope you enjoy them. So thanks again for joining us. Let's go make some money.